All eyes were on her, yet she remained oblivious to the attention. Her laughter echoed through the room, cutting like a blade. Each laugh was a piercing stab to my heart. With a glass in hand and painted smiles all around, it felt like a cruel theater I hadn't recognized until this moment, where I found myself in the role of the betrayed. Her laughter lingered in my mind, every note screaming his name. I saw her, free, confident, and secure, as though she believed she could control everything. Little did she realize that control had slipped through her fingers that morning when I left the house, heartbroken, only to return with a resolution: I would no longer be the silent man. "Are you sure about this?" a friend had asked hours before. "Do you really want to do this here in front of everyone?" I did. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear that it wasn't just about my pain. It was about justice, about making her feel at least a fraction of what I had experienced that night. No one truly understands the sting of betrayal until they see their beloved in another's embrace. I had witnessed hidden messages, exchanged knowing glances, and excuses that didn't add up, all punctuated by that scent, her perfume. I tried to dismiss it, to convince myself it was all a misunderstanding. But when you see the truth with your own eyes, there's no escaping it. As she laughed, the lies illuminated her smile. I walked around the room, every step heavy with dread. I was about to turn the tables, but fear clawed at me from within. What if I was wrong? What if it was all a terrible mistake? Yet deep down I knew it wasn't. I had the proof, messages, images. I had seen it myself. They were entwined, and he touched her as if he owned something that never belonged to him. Rage ignited inside me, yet I forced myself to stay composed. "You look strange today," she had said earlier. "Everything is fine," I replied, forcing a smile that felt monumental. I longed to scream, to confront her with everything, but I needed to wait for the right moment. She deserved to feel the ground shift beneath her feet. She deserved to be blindsided, just as I had been. As the toast commenced, she rose, her eyes sparkling as if she were reveling in the best moment of her life. She gazed at him. Yes, him. And in that instant, I understood she had already erased me from her life. What she didn't know was that I had done the same. The difference was that I intended to reveal this in front of everyone. I raised my glass, my heart pounding so intensely that I could hear it blending with the surrounding voices. But I maintained my calm. All eyes turned to me. She smiled, and for a fleeting moment, I was overwhelmed by memories of how she had once gazed at me, as if I were the only man in the world. But that moment evaporated quickly as I noticed her searching for his gaze. "Today is a special day," I said, my voice steadier than anticipated. "Not only are we celebrating achievements, but we also mark new phases and changes." She smiled again, but I pressed on. "Today, I would like to share something with you all." The room fell silent, tension mounting. I made an important decision, something I should have done long ago. I inhaled deeply. "I have finally decided to free myself." She laughed, thinking I was joking. I locked eyes with her, and her smile faded. "I have decided I will no longer live ensnared by lies. I will no longer be part of this farce." Panic flooded her expression as the reality of my words settled in. "I filed for divorce." The room remained still. The glass slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor. She attempted to speak, but no words emerged. I persisted, and more than that, I've ensured that custody of the children will remain with me because I'm the only one here who still cares about them. "You can't do this," she whispered, her gaze clouded with panic, the pieces of her world crumbling in real time. "I can," I replied calmly, "because I already did." Whispers began to circulate. Words like treachery, scandal, and shame hung in the air. She stared at me as if I were a stranger, unable to fathom that I had actually done this. But I did, and in that moment I felt an unexpected relief. What I didn't foresee was what would follow. I didn't realize it then, but this was merely the beginning. When you tamper with secrets, they tend to multiply. That night I uncovered something that rendered everything I thought I knew irrelevant. Sometimes, betrayal isn't the worst thing someone can do to you. I looked at her, and she was crying, tears cascading down her face as if her world had ended. But it was not remorse. It was fear. Fear of something I had yet to unveil. In that moment, I understood that I still didn't possess the entire truth. Her thoughts raced with numbers, yet Laura lingered in Ethan's mind. He pondered her whereabouts. Had she fled, or was she simply waiting for the opportune moment to reappear? Despite his attempts to deny it, a part of him still yearned for answers. When he finally received a message from her, his heart raced. It was brief, requesting to meet at a secluded cafe away from prying eyes. He hesitated, considering dismissing it, but he knew he couldn't proceed without understanding what she had to say. The next day, he arrived early at their designated location, keenly observing the surroundings. Laura appeared a few minutes later, visibly strained, with dark circles under her eyes and a worn expression. She took her seat carefully, as if wary of any wrong move. "I just want to talk, please," she implored. Ethan remained silent, watching her anxiously wring her hands. Taking a deep breath, she continued, "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I know that's impossible. I just need you to listen because there are things you don't yet understand." He crossed his arms, maintaining a firm posture. "You've already deceived me so much, Laura. Why should I trust anything you say now?" She averted her gaze but then met his eyes with an intensity he hadn't anticipated. "Because I have nothing left to lose," she replied earnestly. Laura began to explain how her relationship with the man she had brought home started as an innocent reunion. She described how he seemed willing to assist her with her financial difficulties, but it quickly morphed into something darker. He began to threaten her, not only due to the money she had embezzled, but also with personal information that could obliterate her reputation. As she spoke, Ethan listened quietly, his anger simmering. He suspected Laura was still withholding parts of her narrative, but didn't interrupt her. When she finished, she remained quiet, awaiting his reaction. Ethan inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the dilemma before him. Part of him wanted her to face the consequences of her choices alone, but another part, one he begrudged, still cared. Not because of lingering love, but because she was the mother of their children. "Do you understand what you've done?" he ultimately asked, and Laura nodded slowly. "I destroyed everything." Ethan shook his head. "It's not just about what you destroyed, it's what you jeopardized, our family, the company, the life we built together. And now you expect me to believe you're remorseful?" She gazed at him, tears pooling in her eyes. "I am. I know nothing I say will amend this, but I'd do anything to retract what I've done." Silence enveloped the table again, broken only by a notification on her cell phone. Laura looked at the screen, and her complexion drained of color. Ethan seized the phone before she could conceal it. The name on the message made her stomach drop. It was him, the man who had turned their lives upside down. Ethan skimmed the message, his anger surging. He was demanding more money and threatening to expose Laura to the police and their children. Ethan stood abruptly, the scraping chair cutting through the tension. "We're going to resolve this." Laura's eyes widened in fear. "What?" He locked his gaze with hers, his voice firm. "I will handle this, but not for you, for the children. I won't allow that man to dictate what remains of my life." Laura nodded, wiping away her tears. As Ethan left the cafe, he didn't look back. Determined, he would put an end to the chaos. For the first time in a long time, he felt he had regained control. Doubt still lingered about Laura's subsequent actions, but it was clear Ethan would not permit the past to dictate his future. He exited the cafe with resolute steps, his heart racing. He was about to cross a threshold he could never reverse, but hesitation had no place. The name on the message continued to haunt him, a cruel reminder of all he had lost. At that moment, Ethan was no longer preoccupied with her. He didn't think of their love, or the happy memories that felt remote, like fragments from a different existence. Now, all that mattered was breaking the cycle of lies, threats, and destruction. He drove through empty streets, his mind racing with possibilities and plans. Arriving home, he settled into his office, surrounded by folders and documents from his investigations. The evidence lay before him: bank transactions, messages, call records. He had everything necessary to involve the police, yet he understood it would completely devastate Laura. Although a part of him yearned to see her pay for her actions, another part clung to the need to protect their children and preserve the image of the mother they had known. Ethan recognized he couldn't act solely on anger. It needed to be strategic. That night, when Laura called, he answered without a word. Her voice trembled on the other end, almost unrecognizable. "He wants more money. He said he'll expose me to my parents and the children. He said he's going to finish me, Ethan. I don't know what to do." He closed his eyes, gripping the phone tightly. "You have to confront it. You need to stop running." Laura began to cry, but he remained resolute. "You must decide whether to continue living in fear or to confront what you've done, because I've already made my decision." She fell silent, seeming to realize Ethan was no longer there to rescue her. The next day, Ethan traced the man. He arrived at the address he had discovered during his investigations and waited. When the man emerged, Ethan approached without hesitation, looking him squarely in the eyes. The exchange was brief. The man initially smiled, confident he had the upper hand. But Ethan was clear. "I have everything: evidence, records, witnesses. If you take another step, I'll bring you down. And I'm not only referring to the police. I'm talking about total exposure. You will no longer be able to walk down the street without being recognized." The man's confidence evaporated. He tried to react, to intimidate, but Ethan held his ground. This time he was ready to go all the way. Laura later learned of his confrontation, and her reaction was a mix of relief and guilt. She expressed her gratitude, but Ethan didn't respond. There was no room for reconciliation. He knew his actions weren't for her, but for his children and his own peace. However, he also recognized that this did not signify the end of their issues. Laura would have to grapple with the repercussions of her decisions, and he wouldn't involve himself in that process. In the months following, Laura faced the fallout. She was terminated from her job after Ethan exposed internal fraud. He worked to limit the damage to prevent a greater collapse, but Laura could not escape the consequences. She lost her job, her reputation, and much of the social circles she had created over the years. With no viable options left, she moved into a small apartment far from their old neighborhood. The children spent the majority of their time with Ethan, who gained primary custody after a lengthy but essential process. Laura struggled to maintain contact, attempting to mend the relationship shattered by betrayal and lies, but visits were tense, and it took time for the children to forgive her. On the other hand, Ethan found the fortitude to push ahead. He redirected his efforts toward his career while rekindling interests he had neglected. He resumed morning runs, indulged in reading on weekends, and eventually began to socialize with friends once more. During one of these outings, he met Rachel, a woman with a warm smile and genuine eyes. She differed from Laura in almost every respect, yet she filled the void left behind. Initially, it wasn't easy, particularly as Ethan still bore the remnants of pain and suspicion, but Rachel was patient. She listened when he needed to vent and allowed him space when silence was necessary. Gradually, she introduced lightness into his life, something he hadn't realized he needed. Meanwhile, Laura remained trapped in regret. She attempted to rebuild her life, yet shame and guilt followed her relentlessly. The man who had shattered her existence vanished after Ethan confronted him, leaving her alone in the aftermath. She contemplated seeking assistance, but allowed pride to restrain her. Every effort to rise seemed to drag her back to the beginning. Time passed, and the children adapted to their new reality. Ethan ensured they received the emotional support needed to cope, but Laura recognized that her relationship with them would never return to its former state. Each encounter served as a reminder of what she had lost. Ethan moved forward. The divorce finalization marked a new beginning. He learned to trust again without forgetting the lessons from his experience. He understood the pain from betrayal wouldn't entirely dissipate, but he refused to let it define him. Rachel stood beside him, demonstrating that true love is founded on respect and loyalty, not illusions. On the other hand, Laura remained stuck in the past. No matter how hard she tried, she could never escape the burdens of her choices. Deep down, she comprehended that she had shattered the only thing that truly mattered. Observing Ethan forge ahead, she recognized he had embraced what she never learned to value: peace. This story serves as a poignant reminder of how betrayal can leave lasting scars, not only on those who are betrayed, but also on those who betray. It illustrates that choices yield consequences, and that regardless of the anguish it may bring, the truth eventually emerges. If you enjoyed this story, please leave your comments and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Remember, this channel does not support infidelity of any kind. We aim to illuminate the consequences, encouraging reflection on your own choices. Thank you for joining us on this intense and captivating journey.